I think anger is one of the emotions that almost every family would raise their hand and say, this is an area that we need some support on, right? This is an area
Yep.
we should. But what I wanted to ask you was, is it that anger is more difficult to manage compared to the other emotions? Or is it that the consequences of reacting in anger is so much more vivid that we feel anger more?
I think the latter. I think that's a beautiful way to say it, because anger is an intense emotion. And as you know, as I know, because we're human beings, and I always say there are two kinds of people. There are people who have issues and dead people. So if you're alive, you've got issues. And when it comes to these emotions, we have intense emotions. Now, anxiety can be really intense. Sadness, depression can be really intense. But you hit the nail on the head, because with anger, typically it's the consequences. Because to get out of anger, we often lash out to get rid of it. But then, boom, we look at the consequences and say, oh, now the anger's gone, but I'm left with the consequences. This is one of the reasons why I always say to people, emotions come and go, but your actions simply cannot be undone.
Love that. Okay, let's dive a little deeper into helping us all understand what's happening when we get taken over by anger. When anger, because sometimes it feels like it almost blinds you, like you lose the ability to respond in alignment to your goals or your intention. So what's really happening for us in those moments?
So if you've ever, anyone out there watching, if you've ever had a moment where you had a really scary moment, maybe you're driving on the road and someone almost cuts you off and you think, oh no, and there's a flash. What happens in that moment is your brain floods your body, specifically your fight or flight response, sends a message to your adrenal glands and it goes, watch out. And now your body's flooded with this cortisol and adrenaline, and it almost feels surreal, like, wow, this is like a life-threatening moment.
Mm.
And when we're in these deeply intense moments, the only way to expel this energy is often rah, I yell, I scream, a hit, some sort of action that we complete the energy. And one of the simplest ways to see this is if you ever watch ducks on a pond. So if you've ever watched these ducks on a pond, and here they go and they fight, 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 fight. When they go away from each other, you'll watch them flap their wings really hard. And I always say they're flapping their wings to get the rest of that energy out. They have to get rid of it. And we need to do that too. What I've found are creative ways for us to get flap our wings, essentially, like in relationships and parenting. Like, let's find a way to flap our wings so that we don't have to come at others simply because we're in this uncomfortably intense emotion.
I love that. And I love the analogy with the birds, because I remember when my kids were younger and I would take them to the pond, I would point out what the birds were doing. They're letting it go. Don't hold on to it all. Um,
Yes.
I think sometimes the intensity of anger, and for most of us, like I know growing up, there were some emotions that were okay for me to express as a child, and some that it was simply no. And anger was one of them. Like you were not allowed as a child to experience anger. Somehow anger was reserved for the adults around us, right?
Right.
So I think there's, for a lot of people, I think they will always raise their hands up quite easily to say, I would avoid conflict in order to avoid the anger. And in doing that, you avoid having some really important conversations that you need to have within the family environment. So let's talk about what's behind avoiding conflict and some ways that we do avoid conflict.
Well, I think the central thing is control. Like you just made a beautiful point. Like if I can avoid the anger in my mind, I somehow controlled that I didn't have to go into conflict. And I think that I'm controlling the situation, but I'm not. I'm actually creating more conflict. And
Mm.
so with children, I think one of the most important things we can do as parents is not make what they're feeling wrong or bad. For instance, like I'm going to go to fear, but I'll link it to anger. But as a parent, we never want to see our children hurt. So when they're scared, they might say, Mommy or Daddy, I'm scared. And we go, no, you're not. Wait a minute. We just taught them that their natural feeling of fear is now not associated with the word fear. So what are they supposed to call it now? And so we do it because probably out of love, we don't want them to be afraid. But what I teach and what yield theory is centered on is this. If my daughter would fall down when she was little and she would say she was in pain, I would look at her, I would get down, first of all, make sure you're always down at that level if they're young children. And I would say to her, oh my goodness, that hurts so badly. And she'd say, yes. And I say, it feels like it's going to hurt forever, doesn't it? And she would say, no, it's actually starting to get better. Actually, I'm better. And she would pull herself out of it really quickly, because my first move was never to tell her what she felt. My first move was to assess what she felt genuinely and then accept it and say, you're okay. Like if you feel scared, that's okay to feel. Feelings are there to teach us. And if we constantly tell children, you don't feel this way, I think we're teaching them not to associate words with what they actually mean.
That's beautiful. And a lot of times I think for many of us really, especially growing up in that paradigm where that was the norm, where your feelings were sort of dismissed, we still do it to ourselves as adults. So it comes up and you go, no, yeah, no, I'll deal with that later, or never. You push it away rather than flap your wings and let it go. I want to talk a little bit about what it takes from a mindset perspective to be able to shift our reaction. So rather than saying, I will be comfortable to react in anger and make that about the other person, you made me angry. And really kind of own that we get the opportunity to respond. What sort of things do we need to do from a mental perspective to shift? You've got some beautiful analogies that I'd like you to share.
Well, that's so cool that you asked me this question, because here's what's happening. My life is kind of nonstop, and I work with the corrections in prisons. And actually today I'm working on, right before we started this interview, I'm working on an emergency protocol for when we're going to have inmates spending more time in their cells as we clean around this COVID stuff. And so I'm creating exercises for them. And the one I was working on right before we called was one specifically about exactly your question, which is our minds want to match our bodies. And so our minds, when we feel hungry, let's say we feel agitated, irritable, and how many of us, I love the raising your hand because you're so right. How many of us out there would say, when I was hungry, I was a little snappy with my loved one. I was a little agitated. Yeah, I'd have to put up both hands, you know? And so what happens is the part of our brain that experiences hunger and agitation and sleep and lack of sleep, or if we're tired, that's called the hypothalamus. And it's centered right in the middle of our limbic system, right in the middle of our emotions. And so we often think when I'm angry, it's you are causing me this anger. But what I teach with yield theory is this. Sure, definitely at times our thoughts do impact how we feel. I agree with that. But what I have found in my career for 22 years is this. Oftentimes our mind wants to match our body. So if my body feels agitated and irritable because I'm hungry, and like I said, we're in the middle of our limbic system every time we're hungry, every time we're overly tired, then what I do is I create a story to match. So I'll say, well, if I'm really hungry, it must be you. You looked at me wrong, and you've been looking at me wrong for 2 days now, and I never said anything about it. And now I'm creating this whole story. And really the secret is this, to be able to step outside yourself, call yourself on what you're experiencing. So I might say to my wife, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. We've been married 20 years. And thank you. It's beautiful. We have a beautiful, beautiful relationship. But one of the things we do is this. I might say, if I feel agitated or irritable, I'll say, listen, I'm starving. You look like a piece of pizza right now. So if I say anything that's short, it's because I'm hungry. And my wife is like the most beautiful Zen person in the world. So she's like super Zen. So she'll be like, that's cool. Just feel, she's like, I'll get you something to eat. And but what we've learned to do is we've learned to say to each other, it's okay to just say, listen, this body feels agitated. but I don't have to make up a story. So that exercise I was working on, and it's a new exercise for them in the prison system. And so I'm putting together a new program. I'm writing it today. And I said, the program is, I said, could you imagine if, and here's what I want you all to do, step away the next time you feel agitated and irritable. And instead of saying it's someone else, say, what might be going on inside this body? So my message to people is become the observer, like almost like a scientist. You look at it, you go, well, there's cortisol going on in here. There's adrenaline flowing. He's hungry. He's tired. This is really powerful. I wrote something in one of my books called Life Lessons. I wrote this story about, by all means, go to bed angry. So in other words, if you're overly tired, and you're fighting because one or both of you is overly tired, again, hypothalamus, middle of your limbic system, say to each other, go, listen, I love you. I'm just really tired right now. And let's finish this in the morning. Yep. And truth is, most of the time you wake up in the morning, if you're still angry, you can keep fighting. But no, I never see that. 20 some years, I never see it. They go, yeah, thank goodness we didn't keep fighting.
You also talk about recognizing the power that you have, and you had a visual of showing almost like Iron Man having his power up little button here on the chest.
Yeah. I love that.
I wanted you to share that because this is one that I'm going to share with my kids, because I thought it was such an important visual to have that mind shift quite quickly.
Yes. So I do tons of visuals. I just love them. I think we learn in diverse ways. Yes. And so I try to meet people where they are and say, let's find something creative. But let's say we'll take this phone here. If you can see, I mean, this box is easier to show up on the, okay. So let's say we take this little box. So let's say that this is my power. And here's the message. We all have a power about us, but our power is intangible, right? We don't know what it is. But what if, like Iron Man, the superhero, what if our power source was right here in the middle of our chest? Does that come through on the camera?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say this power source is right here. Well, if this is my power source and I go to fight the bad guy, you know, I'm Iron Man, I'm fighting the bad guy. I'm not going to take off my power source and go, here you go, you can have this now. No, I'm going to hold on to my power. And so when we think about this in the context of our lives and real practical reasons to do this, you can do this with your children for sure. If you're going to go up to, if someone's going to come up to you and they're mean, why would you take off your power and go, hey, here you go, you can have my power now? Instead, we got to hold on to it. So when people are mean or struggling, and they're mean for a reason, they're struggling, they're in pain, they're insecure. And so when we can look at them and we can say, listen, I appreciate that you want to give me a lot of anger right now, but I'm just not accepting it right now. So I appreciate that. I'm here for you, but I'm not going to take it. And one way to do that is to recognize, one way we give our power away is if someone says something to us, we react to it. So maybe you say to me, maybe you're mad at me, you say, Dr. Conte, you made me feel this way. Well, if I was going to give you my power, I would say, I did not, you did that. No, listen, I go, so it feels like I'm the one who did this to you. Tell me about that. Mm-hmm. Now I'm holding on to my power. I'm listening to you. I can lead with love and compassion, but at the same time, I'm true to my own strength and my own power. And I cannot tell you, I work with people who are convicted of violent crimes. I work in a very serious world, in a very painful world. And I can't tell you how many times people have done this. And then on the reverse, when I'm in prison and I'm in these maximum security prisons, working with these people who have done really horrific things, and I teach them this and I'm one-on-one, I see tears coming down. Like, Doc, I gave my power away so many times in my life. Why didn't somebody teach me this when I was young? And so I said, that's why I'm out there. I try to give the world my messages every day. Like every day I wake up, I meditate, I picture stand in front of the world. I say a conscious statement on Twitter. I'm constantly saying, how do we get this message out there? Because too many people, we're giving away our power to people who don't even deserve it. I'll give you another analogy that can work with children or with anybody. You and me, we can use this. If somebody offered you and tried to give you a plate, let's say it's a bunch of crap, and they go to give you a plate, you're going to go, I'm not taking that. Like, whoa, get away from me. But yet, think about it. If somebody goes to hand you a plate of negativity, you go, oh, thank you, I'll take it. And And now you're caught up in all this negativity, but that's not even what you wanted. So why accept it? So I was just thinking about putting a statement out this week. I just thought about this week, where I appreciate if you want to offer me your anger, unsolicited criticism, or negativity, but unfortunately right now I am not accepting it. Please keep it and come back to me later. But I might not be accepting it then.